All right, so we're back. Peter, I wanted to kind of tee you up with this next one, which is, trends that are there any trends that you're seeing from the esports people? We obviously mentioned the cloud. With respect to multiviewers, are there big differences? But let's start this. Are there big differences between the real world multiviewer needs and the esports multiviewer needs? And then also, are there any trends you're seeing in the esports specific?
I'd say the real world certainly is also moving, to at-home and distributed production, and even people who are building new production facilities today are looking to be able to scale into the cloud and also maintain at-home workforces when needed. So it's all kind of mashing up. I don't see the huge differences, but the bigger difference is because esports is so much, some of the companies, some aren't, but most of the companies are, aggressively moving in the cloud with these complex productions. The real challenge they're finding is how to build all these complex workflows that are scaled appropriately for each event and be able to orchestrate those and spin them up on demand and have a streamlined way of doing that, so they really can not only have economics of the cloud because they're not only running when they need to, but not follow the traditional sports model, because a traditional sports team event, like if I set up a whole game the day before, I would never shut the whole truck down until an hour before the game. You'd be shot if you did that, right? I mean, like, no way would you do that. You build this whole thing, you do a rehearsal, it's all working. It's like, don't touch anything until game time. It's all just sits there and hums, generators keep running, whatever, right?
Right.
Whereas in the esports model, Mo is exactly right. There's this fail fast mentality. I've had an esports customer come to me who said, I need additional monitoring for what we're doing next week. And get a license, stand up in a day and using on the air the next day. In 48 hours, they're on air with it. So it's just that kind of, we'll try anything, test drive mentality. That's a whole different culture than traditional. It's interesting. I'm actually curious to ask one question to your group here too, but the esports is so immersive, and you can actually create, virtual camera angles that one could never do in real life. Is this audience being trained to expect this? And if they watch traditional sports, are they going to look flat to them, boring, because there isn't this level of immersiveness or the ability for a camera, for example, to follow the ball from sender to receiver, and do those sort of things? I mean, are they going to look at what we do today for traditional sports and go, that's kind of boring?
Right. Anybody want to take that? Daniel, wanted to take that one?
Well, possibly. I do think that traditional sports have been looking, how they deliver replays and from various different places around the stadium. So I do think you do see an awful lot of angles, the availability of those. What I think you get is that will change, and is, I guess, changing for mainstream sport. It is viewer interactivity. I think that's huge to engage the viewer. And your mainstream, in the Premier League, for instance, in the UK, a lot of fans are at home either on their sofas or I hope one day again in bars and pubs.
Right.
I think being able to interact with the studio, interact with the players. I mean, that's or interact with players on the touchline, something like that. I mean, recently over the last couple of years, there's been VR 360 cameras put in positions like next to the player's bench. So effectively, the VR viewer could look to his left or right, and be sat next to one of the substitutes. Obviously, there's question with that availability of putting those cameras in those places and whether players would allow them. But that has been investigated, and there has been some take up of that. But I think hugely, it's just interaction, engagement with fans, with their favourite stars and players. I think that's where mainstream needs to head to, and whether they're the same fans that do esports are the same fans that are engaged in the mainstream, I don't know. I do see a lot of difference in that with some of the viewers, but obviously not of late, because there's been a lot of mainstream fans who've engaged in esports productions, of course.
Right. Well, I remember talking to a world-class football director a few years back, and he spoke at our football summit, and he said, look, the problem is that the real game of football is very boring and dry compared to the video game of football. So these kids grow up playing the FIFA game, and the players have amazing reactions, and they leap and they do this, and then they watch the real game. They're like, this is so Dullsville. So he's like, how do we bring that energy, whether it's either more player audio or that kind of stuff? So it'll be cool to see that push and pull. I mean, Mo, what's your take as far as will esports, I guess, this is a wild card question. Will esports impact real world production?
I believe it's already started. I mean, I think one of the things that this pandemic, and you talk to the folks at NBA, you talk to the NHL, not having fans in the stadiums have allowed the production teams to try a bunch of different things that they wouldn't have done, simply because of fans in the seats occupy space. I can't put a camera there. I can't put a camera there. I can't take that perspective. The bubble in the NBA gave us a whole bunch of different perspectives in the camera, positioning, view of the game. It almost starts to see the gamification of the sports, right? The other side of it is like Daniel talked about, the volumetric cameras are that 360. We've seen a lot of it in NFL matches or NFL games. Sorry, I got to flip between the two, European talk and everything else. You see that's starting to becoming a lot more popular, and being able to create a different perspective. The 360 of a NBA dunk. The other side of it is is going to be the 8K camera. I think the first reactions that people saw when Fox put it on air was, this feels like a video game. Like, that was the initial reaction, was like, this feels like this angle. Why might it feel like a video? I mean, that's what you're starting to see, those techniques. So I think there is a lot to be learned from the esports side to create, as Daniel pointed out, that relationship to the audience, who want to see a little bit of a different perspective, right? One of these days, I want to be able to see, again, I'm going back to the golf analogy. I want to see how how he approaches the ball and how he crushes it. I want to experience that from his perspective. How do I do that? So that's going to be I think we're going to see an evolution in sport, in the sports production, to take some cues from the esports side of things, and the other side as well. How do I create a higher quality product on the esports? Is really a lot of the techniques, a lot of the experience from the live sports is now being brought to the esports, so you can have that little hybrid.
Yeah, it's weird to think how the video games, in order to create a more cinematic look, used shallow depth of field, right, to create that sort of sense of like, ooh, this is like the real world. And then to your point, when the NFL and NBA start using shallow depth of field for these close-up shots, you're like, ooh, that looks like a video game. It's very it's a little wacky, a little strange how it all influences each other. So Charles, what's your take as far as that relationship, the push and pull?
Yeah, I think Mo just killed it. And I agree with everything you said. I don't think, and I'm going to speak from American football, NFL has been challenged in a long time because they haven't needed to be. And esports now brings in so many possibilities. How much better is watching a game when you can hear J.J. Watt or Tom Brady mic'd up? To me, that adds such a cool layer as a fan. If we could take that one step further and put a camera in Aaron Rodgers' helmet and watch him like scan for receivers and then just nail it, that would be awesome. But to Peter's point as well, I think you're dealing with a younger generation that has a much lower attention span, and the pace of esports is more in line with a Gen Z attention span than a baseball game is. I know watching stuff with my niece, she'll watch Twitch with me, but watching a Yankees game is a little more difficult. And they're just used to having so much going on all the time, because it's not the generation that goes outside and catches fireflies and plays stickball, right? This is a generation that constantly has stimulation in their face on a high level, and their entertainment from both the sports and general entertainment perspective has to keep up with that.
Right. So Daniel, I wanted to bring you in for last question. Obviously we want to get back to the real world, and I went to one event at the Barclays Center. It was a Counter-Strike tournament, and I thought it would last 2 hours. I was like, oh, this is great. I got here at 2:00. I'll be home by 4. And I didn't know it went on for 10 hours. Like, it was, I had the math wrong as far as the number of matches. And so when people always say that these younger generation have the short attention spans, I'm like, if they really like something, they can kind of dial in and watch it forever. What's your sense as far as talking to your clients? How much are they itching to get back to real world arenas and fans and getting that dimensionality back to the productions?
Oh, it's definitely, there's a mix actually. It's some of the broadcasters, have their own studios, so they're quite into carrying on remote production, of course. I mean, it's a huge thing with us at Arena, it's sustainability going forward now. It's, carbon footprints, you need to keep them low. So keeping people at production centers doing multiple games. It's going to stay with us. But there are some broadcasters who don't have their natural studio at their bases. They're production companies that don't have those facilities, and companies like Arena can step up to provide that gap, and that's basically what we got a new Core TX facility production center with the ability to provide that for broadcasters who still want to produce games globally but can't necessarily travel. And with the pandemic as it is, there is an end, but when is the end? When is the start again of normal global travel? And the expense of that will be greater, no doubt. It'd be much more cost effective to stay at home. And remote production is with us to stay. There'll be a mix, right. I guess. Premiership clubs and Premiership broadcasters and all mainstream sports want to be on site, but the footprint will be a lot lower. Most definitely.
And I guess obviously all these leagues are since they are younger, they're very much more sustainability driven and carbon neutral. And they probably love this idea that they're helping the environment. So Charles, what are you seeing? Because obviously you've been in this business for a while. So, I mean, what's missing as far as not having fans in the stands and the players in a central location competing shoulder by shoulder, as opposed to just purely digitally?
Yes. I mean, the esports event you're talking about, I assume, is ESL 1. Which was with Barclays Center, and we were super happy to support that event and be part of it. But I assume that was, as your first esports event, it changes you, and it changes your perspective on everything. And explaining esports to someone, having them watch it on Twitch is not the same as bringing them to an event. And I think that can be said for really any sport, but esports almost times 10. So as just an esports fanatic, I'm super ready to get back to live. We've loved supporting our customers in both the cloud-based and remote capacity, and are excited to continue to do so. But the sooner fans are back in the stands, I can't wait, because the energy level, and as a former player, I can tell you that the energy level is way different than when you hear people screaming and there's pyrotechnics going on. It's a different game than if you're sitting in your house, right? And it changes the entire dynamic of esports and brings legitimacy to it that I think it needs. So live events all the way, maybe can't wait to get back.
Sure. Yeah, Charles, and I'll say that along with you're right, it did change my perspective, just like going to the Ashes for 3 days for cricket, which I recommend, Charles, for you to do. Change my perspective on cricket. Challenge
accepted.
If it's not raining.
It's not raining, exactly. So what's your take, Mo, as far as real world events, the return?
Yeah, I think I echo Charles's point there. I think the environment, the community, I would say, of esports is a social one, right? I mean, it's you just listen to any game. Listen, during the early days of the pandemic, I was on playing Call of Duty with friends, and that's as close as the trash talking I could get to without actually being face to face. But that environment of being face to face in that competition, that's like I said, these are all participants. They want to be in the arena. They want to be in that forum, right? It's virtualized, but being in the live events takes it to another level. So, it's like you said, it's every other regular sports fan being in the middle of the field. I get to play in the field that's time break, but here I am in that event. That's what I sort of related to. So yeah, I think that you'll definitely have a lot more of that. And you can see that. I think when you look at the universities, you start to look at these smaller leagues, they're all investing into this, this movement towards having more and more of these in-person type of things. So I definitely think that that's a critical part of the sort of the community and the culture is to have that. So there'll definitely be more. And I think one of the points that Daniel pointed out earlier was the challenge is going to be, how do I continue to keep the fans engaged? What are the new techniques, right? I know that the production will up themselves again. I'm going to create all these different, interactive environments to make that event bigger. How do I keep the fans engaged? That's kind of where we've seen a lot of traction of this is where the next shift is going to be, is how do I keep that audience engaged? What are the things that I do? How do I keep them more participants? How do we keep them or create more participants out of it? So that's, I think, going to be the next step, is not only get them to them, but keep them engaged.
Sure. Well, that's great. We're out of time, but thanks, gentlemen, so much. Really great to see you all, and see you later this year.